Welcome back to Core Conversations, a CoreLogic podcast. I am your host, Maiclaire Bolton Smith, and I'm the Senior Leader of Research and Content Strategy with CoreLogic. In this podcast, we'll have conversations with industry experts about key topics from housing affordability to the impacts of natural disasters on property. From February 14th through 18th, much of the U.S. experienced one of the coldest snaps on record. The National Weather Service reported frigid Arctic air and dangerously cold wind chills to persist in the Great Plains and Mississippi Valley. This storm was an unusually cold event, with more than 1/6 of the housing units in the country experiencing temperatures 40 degrees Fahrenheit below the average low temperature for that time. Texas was hit exceptionally hard. There's a number of reasons why the cold had such a significant impact on Texas, and that's what we want to talk about today. Before we get into today's episode, I want to take a few minutes to send our thoughts out to those impacted by this storm. Even though CoreLogic is headquartered in California, more than 3,000 CoreLogic employees are based in Texas, so many of our colleagues have been personally impacted by this storm. Science and numbers are a great way to understand what happened, but those data points are people, and as such, we want to share a few stories.
We were without power and heat continuously for the fourth largest snowfall at 6.4 inches, two of the top 10 coldest nights, lows of 7 and 8 degrees Fahrenheit, and the first ever wind chill warnings in the history of Austin, Texas.
My family and I had power and water outages that spanned 12 continuous days, with electricity being out for up to 66 hours straight and water being out for over 96 hours.
We had a water pipe burst over the bedroom, resulting in damage to the mattress. It was completely soaked, so we drug it outside, and it turned out to be a king-size ice cube.
I was supposed to move in on February 16th into my new home, but due to icy road conditions, the movers canceled. Then 2 days later, in the new house, the tankless water heater had a frozen pipe and filled the entire home with 2 inches of water, requiring new drywall, new hardwood floors, and new cabinets. In essence, I have to build my new home from scratch.
The fire sprinkler pipes in my building burst, so not only was I without water for a week, I also got the pleasure of listening to fire alarms day in and day out.
We lost power for about 55 hours and spent a lot of time going back and forth to the car to keep warm. We were just about to run out of power there before the lights came back on.
Okay, I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area and happened to be out of state when the deep freeze happened, but I was aware of the power outages. So I started keeping an eye on the back door through my Ring doorbell camera and was actually able to see for sure the water coming out of my back door.
I know many of these experiences have been experienced by so many others. There's speculation that this extreme weather event will be the largest insured loss in Texas's history. So today, I'm joined by Tom Larsen, catastrophe risk expert and principal insurance solutions, to deconstruct this storm and the impacts it's had. Tom, welcome to Core Conversations.
Well, welcome to you, Maiclaire. Thank you for having me today.
All right, so let's start by introducing you to our listeners. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and your role here at CoreLogic?
Well, thank you for that. The role that I fill is a group called Catastrophe Modeler. As a child, I was fascinated with seeing pictures on television of damage from earthquakes and thought, what could we do to prevent that? My education is as an engineer, but I began my career as working with a company that develops models to help insurers, governments, private corporations understand what can happen so that they can better prepare and strengthen themselves. So for all of it is a curiosity to better understand the world that we live in and try to make it better to prevent tragedies or recurrence of tragedies.
I love that, and that's exactly why you are here with us today. So let's talk about this extreme weather event. From a meteorological perspective, what happened? How did Texas get so cold?
Well, I'm not a meteorologist, so we're going to stray a little bit. It's a breakdown. When you read the meteorology, they're going to tell you it's a breakdown of a polar vortex. Normally, the cold air is confined in the wintertime, is confined to the North Pole. Occasionally, the winds and pressures break down and allow these cold jets of air to extend into the country. And so simultaneous to, we saw this big cold pulse going into the south central US. There were other outbreaks throughout the world of this cold as it leaked from the North Pole. They happen occasionally. We get in Texas, it's about a 10 to 20-year period that you see these extreme colds. What was distinct about this one was the severity of how cold it was and how long it lasted. But the
Yeah.
cold itself is not a surprise.
Okay, so with climate change, then, should we expect to see events like this occur more frequently and maybe even more extreme?
The book is not completely written on the impacts of climate
Mm,
change, but we certainly should expect more volatility. We are
okay.
told that the weather should become more volatile. And what that means is that we should expect more instances of high heat, but also more instances of these types of cold. So the as a player trying to anticipate what should happen in the future, yes, events like this are probably likely to occur more frequently, even though right now we're not sure what kind of frequency is this. Was this a end of days type of event, or was this something that should be in our working drawer of we should survive? But we should expect more of these severe events.
So, can we deconstruct that a bit? Everyone knows that it got cold, but beyond that, there's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding about what caused the power and subsequent water, food, and gas crises. We heard all these stories from our colleagues off the beginning of this episode of what they went through. What actually happened as a result of that cold?
Well, it's a great question. I think we need to step back a bit. Um, when we look at a catastrophe, the first thing you look at is the exposure, what is affected, how much assets, how many people are affected. Then we want to, and for this event, we want to know what are the effects of the cold, what are the exacerbating factors, and boy, there are a lot of them with this. And
Sure.
the end is, you wanted to know is that what does that produce and where are we now? Um, for the exposure, what is at risk? That you defined an area with the shock factor 40 degrees below the average expected. That's 23 million homes. It's about one on six of the homes in the U.S. So it's a very large portion of a very large country. This
Mhm.
is a big event. Uh, we can refine that even more, looking at building design factors, and there's a cohort within there of about 8 million that are really at high risk. Um, Now, what happens to a home when it's subjected to this extreme cold? Um, well, we know water pipes break. They can, and depending on their building design, they are subject to it. Water is perhaps the most insidious because it's a very expensive claim, expensive to adjust. But
Sure.
you also get the secondary effects when you have these big, long uh, these long extended outages. Stoplights don't work, street lights don't work, and we have transit, we have snow blockages in the roads. Um, the exacerbating factors is that there was a big snowball of events that caused the electrical outage to be widespread. Uh, Many of these were natural. It was caused by the cold weather. Many of them they were human caused. They were part of
Mm,
our practices of how we manage the electrical grid that will be changed in the future. They
okay.
at the time when they were set up, they did not realize that we had an extreme vulnerability to a consequence event like this. The net result was a tragedy of millions of homes being out for extended period of time. That made it even worse because you can't heat the house. It exacerbated and made the water pipe breakage more widespread. Um, the follow-ups fact of no food, well, that's consequence of no electricity, the inability to access the infrastructure, uh, and that's why as a planner you try to stem the problem up at the outset, strengthen the buildings and strengthen the electrical grid.
So that is really interesting because there was such a knock-on effect of once the power went out and it got cold and homes got cold and pipes burst and then that led to the water crisis and it just kind of perpetuated from there. So my I have to say that my brain goes to I grew up in Canada and I'm used to extremely cold temperatures, but The difference is the homes further north are designed for extremely cold temperatures. So, what's different about the building stock in Texas that made it unable to deal with these temperatures?
Buildings are designed under building codes. There's a building codes
Mhm.
localized for every place in the most places in the world.
Yeah,
The primary goal for a building code is life safety. We want to make sure that the home we are in does not collapse and injure the occupants. Uh, we build in extra safety factors, but every time we strengthen the home, it adds the expense. And remember, simultaneous, we have a housing shortage uh, that we do not want to add more expense. So it's a fine balance of how strong and resilient do we make these homes versus can we keep them affordable. Uh,
sure. Yeah.
what we're seeing when we compare a home in Dallas, Texas to your home in Canada is there are the home in Texas is not built to confine the heat and keep the heat within the home at the same level that that home in Canada is. It is you're in an area where there's a lot of high heat, but there's also you don't need as much. So the windows are not as well protected. The walls are not as protected. There are fewer details about plumbing, trying to keep the plumbing confined and plumbing insulated. Uh, Not the intent to make them more vulnerable in Texas, but to make them good enough
Mhm.
and while keeping that balancing that affordability and safety.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the affordability because that's something, here at CoreLogic that's really important to us as well too, is understanding, housing stocks across different regions. And that's something I think probably people hadn't necessarily thought about when they're thinking about why are homes designed this way. And you can't design a home for every climate and every hazard in every region because there would be all these monstrous costs of homes across everywhere. When so it really is that regional building code designed for what's most likely for that reason. Is that kind of true?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's for every peril. Oh, here we have cold, but the hurricane, the extreme winds, or the ground motions from earthquakes. Every peril has its own design criteria that again is that tries to meet that balance.
Yeah, and building a bunker is really expensive, so probably not the top of everybody's list. So, okay, so as we heard off the top of this episode from the stories we heard of what happened during this event, the majority of the damage from this extreme weather event really does seem to be water damage from burst pipes. I know that in other catastrophic events like hurricanes and floods, much of the flood damage is not insured without a separate flood insurance policy. I think specifically to Hurricane Harvey, also, which impacted Texas incredibly hard. More than 70% of the damage from Hurricane Harvey was uninsured. So, since most of this water damage is from pipes bursting, is this insured?
Uh, yeah. First, I'd like to caveat. I can't be a advisor to someone interpreting their own policy conditions,
Sure. Yeah.
but we can say that the insurance contract that most homeowners have in Texas is modeled after the standard fire insurance policy in the U.S. And in the standard fire, things that are an accident, the water pipe bursts that are accidental and sudden are
Hmm.
generally covered.
Okay.
So that is different than rising water from a ocean, a flood or a river, and it's different from leaks, persistent leaks. Those are the responsibility of the homeowner to maintain their home, but sudden breaks are generally covered. So
Okay.
we expect that much of the damage that has occurred here will be insured because if you have a mortgage in the U.S., you are required to have that standard fire policy, so you're covered. And most of the homes in the country have a mortgage, so most of the homes have insurance. There
Okay.
are a small cohort of homeowners. Um, Unfortunately, some of them are more vulnerable. The fixed income retirees that have been shown that they drop their insurance, they would be vulnerable to having a break and not having it insured. Uh, so there are no blanket statement that they all will be there.
Okay.
We must be vigilant to make sure that everyone's uh, addressed.
Okay, so advice to homeowners there really is to check your insurance policy, see what is covered and understand what's covered in events that may occur. So I guess if we're thinking about this on the insured loss perspective, Tom, there have been some reports that have said this is going to be the greatest loss in Texas's history. Is that true? And can you give any guidance on what an insured loss estimate may be for this event?
Everyone's fascinated with this number. It is really difficult. While I broke down, I can identify the homes and we have the data, we can identify the at-risk homes. One critical factor of trying to estimate the claims is we're seeing is a loss is related to the electrical outage, persistent. How long was it? Because that brought the cold into the house. And another aspect was the homeowner at home because were they able to avert damage
Uh,
if they saw some leaks? But given that, we can look at some of the earlier estimates on estimated claims from the carriers and try to respond. Those bounds, worst damage, worst loss ever for for Texas. Hurricane Harvey, until now, Hurricane Harvey was the
mhm.
winner with about $16 billion of personal lines, home losses from the widespread flooding. Now, that was a fraction of the damage to homes because unlike this event, flooding, rising waters from were not insured, but $16 billion losses. Um, it is likely that what we're looking at right now is somewhere between 300,000 and 500,000 claims uh, arising from homeowners' claims coming from this event.
Okay.
And the estimating how bad the losses could be, it's anywhere from the average water break normal times of about $10,000. It seems to be trending higher. The damage seems to be a little bit higher from this one. It is very likely that the losses will exceed the insured losses from Hurricane Harvey. It's very likely the losses will go higher than $15 billion just because of the number of claim counts and looking at the trend of the data that's available now for what the average losses will likely to be. But it's unlikely that the damage, because the insured losses will exceed the damage, the insured and uninsured from Harvey. That was about
Right.
$80 billion. At this point, there's tremendous uncertainty, and you can't refine the data a whole lot more as we're trying to focus right now on protecting lives and getting people back to their lives, and then we'll start working on the numbers.
Yeah. So a couple of things there, Tom. You did use the terms insured loss and damage. I'd like to define those a little bit, as well as I think when you talked about Hurricane Harvey, and people often think of Hurricane Harvey as this huge number in terms of what the damage was. And can you just explain, like, because a lot of that was uninsured, just kind of dive in a little bit to insured loss versus damage?
Okay, yeah, thank you for calling me on that. Um, an event occurs, we get damage. Now that damage is that's your home. That's you lost the equity. If you're an owner of that home, you lost that equity, uh, and you want to, how do you restore it? You can restore it with your own funds. You can borrow money, or you can have your insurer pay it back. If it's not insured, you don't have the option of having your insurer restore it. You have to. Um, it impacts the value of your home, and you have to do that. So we uh, we segregate those numbers and we discuss them differently because the insurer wrote you as a promise to restore your property, but there are some aspects that they're not covered. Your mortgage issuer offered you a loan, and the collateral was your home. And
Mm,
now, with your home damaged, your that collateral is impaired, and so now your mortgage bank is interested in what happened to your house is can you restore it because you promised to keep that collateral in good shape as part of your loan. Uh, so it has some systemic effects. It's important to look at all aspects of what really happened as we try to preserve the quality of lives of the people there and keep our financial system sound.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom. I think that that's a really important clarification, and I'm glad you made that. So, if we circle back a little bit, you said this number of at least $15 billion in insured loss from this extreme weather event. You also did talk about Hurricane Harvey, and the thing with Hurricane Harvey is it was, I think, 70% uninsured losses. So, can we just kind of talk about that again? Just the comparison of Harvey, this massive number of damage on uninsured versus what we're looking at here from this extreme weather event.
Well, let's invert those numbers. Harvey, yeah, 30% of the damage was insured.
Wow.
100% minus the 70. For this event, we expect the insurance to cover 95% plus of the losses. The remainder is the deductibles that homeowners pay. And at this point, it's not possible to separate out, but we do know that there will be a number of homes that do not carry insurance.
Okay.
But we expect 90% plus of this to be covered by insurance.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, because I think the differentiation between what happened in Hurricane Harvey and this event when it comes to losses and the overall damage is an important clarification, because there are so many news reports that says this is going to be the greatest loss in Texas history, and people are familiar with what this massive loss was from Hurricane Harvey and just kind of putting this in perspective. So, thank you for that clarification. So, just to finish off today, I'd like to kind of look at the homeowner from a few perspectives. Is there anything homeowners can do to prepare themselves for another event like this? Is it something we're going to have to move towards building our homes better and different as the climate becomes more volatile? Just can you dive into that a little bit from a homeowner perspective, and what can they do?
You know, at this point, I'd like to introduce a new term called resilience.
Mm,
Resilience is discussed. It's our ability to bounce back. We can't control the frequency and severity of natural catastrophes, but what is in our control is how fast we can get back, reestablish the normality of our lives. Now, that resilience, if we peek under the covers of resilience, there are home strengthening, and that is really important. And we are going to spend a
yeah.
lot more time on really understanding that. But the other part of it's the community is how fast you build back. Um, One thing that came out of Hurricane Harvey was the amazing resilience that came out of that Texas event. Massive amounts of damage, yet the economy was able to rebound and start.
Wow.
Now it's complex. What will we expect here is, well, it's still Texas, so that we think of sort of the same psyche. We expect a lot of that same rebuilding, but we all should aspire to that, because it doesn't always happen. And for us to be resilient, which is our goal, it's the noble goal, is we are going to have to strengthen our homes. We have to be prepared. We also have to be anticipate that things will happen that will overwhelm us, but that we can get through them together.
I love that, Tom, and I'm so glad you introduced resilience. It is one of my favorite words, and you said that Texas was really good at bouncing back, and I have to say that at living here in California, as I saw all of these people without power and without water, I told so many of my friends that this is what it's going to be like here after we have a major earthquake. You commented that Texas was really good at bouncing back, and I know from other disasters around the country and other parts of the country, places are not as good at bouncing back. What do you think made Texas so resilient and made them be able to bounce back so well?
it's it's necessary to observe it, because are on our venture, on our journey to try to get better. We need to be able to take note of things that are not as bad as they could have been.
Yeah.
um, and yes, and you anticipate, and optimistically we would like to think that that would happen here. And what can we do to ensure that that happens here? We're still working on it. But it does begin personally, is that what can I do to help? It takes everyone to be able to restart, even those who are not directly affected by the event, to work together to be able to achieve that resilience that we aspire to.
Yeah, I've always said in the earthquake community in particular that the number one thing you can do to prepare for an earthquake is believe it will happen. And I think for any natural disaster, and especially these climate disasters that are getting more impactful and more severe with climate change, just having the awareness that your home may be impacted by a climate disaster and knowing what to do to keep yourself and your family and your home safe. So I do hope that people have found this to be helpful. So, Tom, thank you so much for joining me today on Core Conversations, a CoreLogic podcast. It's been so great to have you here to share your perspective on this event.
You are very welcome, Maiclaire. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Tom. So for more information on the property market and the housing economy, please visit corelogic.com/insights. And for information on impacts from catastrophic events like this extreme weather event, please visit hazardhq.com. Thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed our latest episode. Please remember to leave us a review and let us know your thoughts, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to be notified when new episodes are released. And thanks to the team for helping bring this podcast to life. Producer Ria Tarakia, editor and sound engineer Romeo Roman, and social media guru Mike Wojcik. And a special thanks to those who shared their stories for this episode: Jim Dunham, Mark Drollinger, Matt Carley, Amy Neslin, Tom Owens, and Core Conversations' own Ria Tarakia and Mike Wojcik. Tune in next time for another Core Conversation.